a knife to the heart or maybe knife to the back.
Welcome to Season 2 of the KidLit Craft podcast. This season, we're doing a deep dive into Kayvion Lewis's YA thriller, Thieves Gambit. Today, we're focusing on finishing the story and setting up a sequel. I'm Anne-Marie Stroman, and I write for children and young adults and short stories for adults.
Hi, I am Erin Nuttall, and I write mostly for young adults.
On KidLit Craft, we look at mentor text to discover the mechanics of how writers do what they do so we can apply it to our own writing. And we wanted to let you know that we have 2 workshops coming up in May. The first is May 10th, the Sticky Note Plot with David McInnes-Gill.
I have been through his Sticky Note Plot workshop, and it is excellent. I'm super excited that we are able to offer a workshop from David for our fans because you will learn a lot, and he is amazing.
And the next one will be writing a novel with Touchstone Moments with Lindsay Lackey, who I can tell you is also awesome. And these workshops really complement each other well. David's focusing on the plot side and Lindsay's focusing on the character side. And if you've learned anything from this podcast, we hope that its character and plot are so intensely integrated that you need both sides. So take both.
Yeah, for sure. And I have not taken a workshop from Lindsay, so I'm excited about this to see what new things she has to teach me, because, you know, I'm kind of nerdy about these things. I like to learn more. Mm-hmm. We also have our final Ask the Author book club this month, and we will be talking with Lindsay Lackey about her middle grade novel, Farther Than the Moon. And I don't know if you have been listening to our Ask the Author book clubs or if you've participated, but they are super fun. You really get to know the author and you get to learn about their process, which is always fascinating. And I'm excited to learn more from Lindsay.
So you can sign up for workshops and the book club at kidlitcraft.com. So, Erin, this is our last episode on Thieves Gambit, and appropriately, we are talking about the end of the novel. And as we've mentioned, this novel is not the end of the story. The next book in the Thieves Gambit series is called Heist Royale, and it came out in November 2024. So I'm excited to dive in.
Yeah, well, I will say when I read this, Thieves Gambit originally, I did not know that it was not a standalone book. And so I think it will be interesting to talk today about how she's able to have this standalone story that also leads the reader into the next book.
So let's start with vocabulary. What do you have for us today?
So it may feel really elementary, but I just wanted to have our vocabulary word be sequel. I looked it up, just curious to see what the dictionary world and AI world have to tell me about its definition. And it is a continuation of world and characters, and each book is complete in itself. And I just loved that definition because that is what you hope when you're reading a sequel. You want the first book to be complete in itself, but then you want to be excited for the next book and the continuation of the world and the characters.
So let's start with Thieves Gambit and its own ending, looking at that book that's complete in itself. The book ends, for me, in a really satisfying way. So how does Lewis pull off that this book is complete ending?
I agree that it has a very satisfying ending, which is not always the case in a book that has a sequel. And sometimes as a writer, you may really want a big cliffhanger. You may want Han Solo frozen in carbonite, right? And have your readers be like, oh, what's going to happen? You may want that. And you still get that feeling, but maybe not as intensely at the end of Thieves Gambit, because it is a story that's complete in itself. For me, what gives it that satisfying ending is that she really closes the circle on that idea of the theme of trust. You know, if you've been listening to this, then you know we talk about this a lot, that the theme of the book is Ross's ability to trust people. And Lewis sets it up right at the very beginning. In the first sentence, in the first scene, in the first chapter, all of that is set up. And then she has a journey with trust throughout the whole story. And then the last line, she sums it up for us, where Ross tells us that she has a new rule. So her first rule, her original rule, is trust only a quest. aka someone related to her. And then her last line, her new rule is trust no one. So having that closed circle, I think it really gives me that satisfaction. Is that what you are feeling? Or is there something else that makes you feel like that brings that satisfactory ending for you?
Yeah, I think for me, it's a lot of, she closes out all those threads, right? We have the thread with the mom's kidnapping. We have the thread with the aunt's kidnapping. We have the end of the gambit itself.
Right.
She has contact with Kyung-soon near the end as well.
Right.
So people have filtered out. So it's just her and Devereaux left at the end. We still have this kind of satisfaction of these little connections going back. And we also get that lovely reveal at the end where she sees all the people who have been watching the gambit, who she recognizes from different scenes, that if we think back, we have seen all those people as well.
Right. I did not anticipate that. Yeah. They were watching like a play.
Right. So we get that satisfaction of like, oh, this story is bigger than Ross thinks it is.
Right.
Right. And we get a little more of a peek into the organization and what they want. And so all these reveals and all these closed circles help it feel really satisfying. I'm not left with a dozen questions about what really happened.
Along those lines, we have the desire line that Ross has, and that's, you mentioned a lot of those, the friendship one, a normal life, all of those threads are taken all the way through and those circles are closed. So I agree. That makes it very satisfying as a story on its own. So it can totally stand alone. That can be the end of the book. It's not the most hopeful ending, but it can be the end. And you can be like, yeah, I'm there, right?
Yeah. And so we've talked a lot in our pacing episodes about where the events of the story happen within the course of the entire novel. Are there elements of structure or plot pacing that come into play with this ending?
So I think the way that it ends is really interesting. And in some ways, I feel like it sort of has a double ending. And I think that does lead to the setup of the next story. But as we said, it also does not mess up the integrity of the first story. So we have Lewis hitting all of the regular story marks that you might have. So there's excellent world building. There's an exciting, inciting incident. There's the midpoint turn, a climax, a denouement. You get all of those things. But we kind of have like I said, I see it as sort of a double ending because you have a lot of those story marks that come to the end of the gambit. And then you have those story marks that are part of the bigger story that's going to unfold in the next book. So we have more than one all is lost moment when Mom reveals her perfidy, right? And that's like 352. And I think there's only like 364 or something like that pages. We'll just call it that. And we'll say it's 364. So it's, in the last 12 pages of the book, we have this next all is lost moment. And so that is really awesome. Obviously, it's like a defining moment in Ross's trust journey. But then because it's sort of drawn out, then we get these last moments setting up the next book. But if you're like me and you didn't know there was another book, it's only as these moments are coming that I'm like, I wonder if this is not going to be. And that's probably only also because I am like I'm a structure nerd. I imagine if you're just reading it for the fun of reading, you won't even think about that. You're just like so involved in the story, right? Mm-hmm. So I like that dual use of those last 12 pages where you have sort of your double ending / setup for the next book.
You do need that 12 pages to end the first book, I feel like, right? Like there's the end of the gambit proper, but we haven't gotten to the prize winning part.
Right.
And we get twist, twist, twist. And right. We get the twist of the mom's betrayal. We get the twist of now she has to pay for the aunt's release with her own labor. And we get the last twist that she's going to have to work with Devereaux and the time starts now.
Right.
So in that last little sequence, we get those extra twists, which feel to me like a satisfying ending.
Mm-hmm.
And as you mentioned, they also are set up.
So I do think that is interesting because you're right. We would not have had a satisfactory ending without it, but it's definitely hitting some of those story marks for a second time. And I haven't actually thought about it until just now. So it would be interesting to look at other action thriller books to see if that's common to have the double ending where you have the action end and then the emotional end.
I would guess so.
Yeah, I imagine that you're right. Well, if you're doing a thriller where you actually are engaging in an emotional side, which a lot of thrillers give a cursory nod to the emotional side. But if you're really engaging the emotional side of the character, then I think that you're right that you would have to have, or you would want to have that sort of that double ending. And maybe some of them have a double beginning, but because Lewis was so adept at her beginning, she was able to do it all at once.
Yeah. I mean, I think in the beginning, like you have Ross's beginning and then you have the Gambit beginning
right.
as well. And so then you have the Gambit ending and then you have like the Ross's ending. So I think it bookends.
I think that is a really good way to think about it. Look at how smart you are.
And I also think that the other piece is that we have seen throughout the book how she will get to kind of a climactic moment or a big moment. And then we think it's like, oh, that's as big as it can get. And then it gets bigger and then it gets bigger. So she has these moments of layering on or like amping up the tension or adding stress. And so it makes sense that if she didn't have it at the end, it would feel weird, right? We need that at the end too, where it goes to 11. The consequences have got to be bigger than we think they are. Like losing the Gambit is just, oh, well, now I can go home to mom and auntie. Like, that's not satisfying, right?
No.
Like, there need to be bigger consequences for losing the Gambit.
That would be super boring. You know, it's interesting. Quite a few years ago, I had a cute teenage babysitter, and I was taking her home, and she had been reading, I think it was the last Twilight book. And I was asking her how she liked it, and she was super mad because she felt like the ending was so anticlimactic. And she went on at length about it. And as someone who generally roots for nonviolence in a story, because what happens is they're supposed to have this big battle at the end and then they don't. And so it is interesting to think about that reader's disappointment. I mean, there is no battle, obviously, in Thieves Gambit, but there's more of an emotional battle, I guess. So, yeah, it is an interesting thing to think about how you use that time to set up and to not dismantle your story, but close out your story.
Yeah, close out your story. And like in this case, it is a downer ending, right? Like Ross is ending up worse than she was at the start of the book. Have you seen that Kurt Vonnegut lecture that he does where he talks about the shape of stories?
I haven't.
It's a great one. We can put it in the show notes. But he talks about, you know, you start on an average day with an average person, and then they might have good fortune and then ill fortune, and then their fortunes rise again. And so you have that shape to the story. And then Cinderella, you're starting very, very low.
Right.
And you get built up and she's at the ball and it's very high. And then the clock strikes and her fortunes fall. And then the prince comes and finds her and she's not as low as she was before, but then she goes up to, he says, off scale happiness. And I think in this case, you know, Ross is starting out where she's at first like in a pretty good situation, right? She has a life that provides for her. She has family. The thing that she's missing is friends. So there is a lack there, but she's starting out in like fairly good circumstances. And then when her mom is kidnapped, everything tanks.
Right.
And then at the end of the story, it's not just that her mom was kidnapped, but her mom betrayed her. She's lower than she was before.
True.
Right. She's had some heights with the relationship with Devereaux, with these connections with other characters, with this reconciliation with Noelia, with succeeding at some of the heists, thinking she's going to win, being smarter than the organizers. But then at the end, she's ending up lower.
Right. Which is
so
a
that's
great place. Oh, are you going to say the same thing?
Yeah.
It's a great place to start the next book.
So talk to us about how that ending sets up the next book.
Well, I think you described it really well, because now she is in this really low place, and now we like her and we're rooting for her. And so we want her to dig herself out of that, right? So there is that. But the other thing that I think is really interesting is because we were just talking about like these closed circles, and actually they have like a little crack or something in them, because she doesn't trust her mom, obviously, and she doesn't trust her romantic interest of Devereaux, but she has friends. She has Milo and Kyung-soon and now Noelia. And so she's starting to have this network of other people. So that is possible that she could be in the next book continuing to explore that trust theme. And Ross may end up reevaluating from trust no one to my trust is earned or something, right? And same with, she has this desire line met of friends, but she has a new desire line of getting out from under the thumb of the organizers, right?
Right. And even more, this conflict with Devereaux, I think, sets up a lot. I pulled actually the first paragraph from the next book, which starts 6 months later. It's Heist Royale, and it starts on Ross's birthday, January 13th. And she and Devereaux are on a job together for the organizers, and they're at some big stadium concert. Is the scene where it starts. So it's very different from the opening of Thieves Gambit. Yeah. But it starts like this. If I pretended hard enough, I could almost believe the fireworks bursting over the stadium were for me. According to my phone, it was still 11:47 p.m., but that was Rio time. Back on Andros, it was January 13th already. Close enough. It was my freaking birthday, and all I wanted was to see one debonair vest-wearing traitor destroyed. And then Devereaux talks into her earpiece, right? And they have banter, which I know you love.
I do.
So even from that very beginning, we know that she doesn't trust him. She's sticking with that at the start,
right.
But there's this added revenge.
Well, it's interesting that it's 6 months later, too, because she has a year contract. So she's halfway through, and a reader might think that she would fall back into her pleasant feelings for him, maybe. So yeah, so we have those circles that have cracks. And then, like you were mentioning, we have these new avenues to explore. So she's not working for her family anymore. She's working for the organizers. And she has to work with Devereaux. And clearly she still doesn't trust him. And yes, like you said, there's revenge. And who doesn't like a good revenge?
The thing we haven't mentioned is he won, so he got a wish, and he delayed his wish.
Okay, this is, again, I was just about to bring up the wish, because, we're in sync today. Yeah, so then we have the Gambit wish that Devereaux has. And I don't know if you ever watched How I Met Your Mother, but they had this slap bet. The cast of characters would do these bets with each other, and I totally don't remember. It's been too long to remember how it was set up. But anyway, if you ended up winning the bet, one of the characters would have like a cache of slaps, and they could just slap another character for no reason out of nowhere, or for whatever reason they personally held, and you just didn't know when the slap was coming, right? And I feel like it was a great story tool, because when it came, it was like, such a surprise. And then you got to refer back to a different episode. And then you got to continue whatever was going on. Like, it's just such a fantastic story tool. And I think that this is what that reminds me of, is the slap bets of that show. Don't go back and watch it. I'm sure it does not hold up. But it did have some interesting story tools, and that was definitely one of them. And that's what Devereaux has. He has his Gambit wish. And at the end of this book of Thieves Gambit, the organizers were dangling the eradication of Ross's entire family. I mean, hello, talking about ratcheting it up to 11. Now, as a reader, I wasn't super worried about that, because I personally, even though he betrayed Ross, I thought he's a good guy. He's not going to eradicate a whole family.
Not in the page and a half left that we have left of the book.
But we also know he betrayed her. And so while he might not eradicate her whole family, he's still out for himself. And it could still be devastating for Ross. So there's a lot that could happen and that we're teased with in those last few pages, right? It's just really well done because she closed a lot of stories and then left or started new circles, if we're going to continue with that metaphor. She started new circles for the next book. I just can't emphasize how happy it makes me that it was a satisfying ending for this book, for this story, and then gave me enough to want to read the next one. I hate the Han Solo and Carbonite endings. But that's just me. Some people probably love them. Some people love them, but...
That one we knew there was going to be more, so...
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Although my husband was a young child and saw that in the theater and was like, what?
It's a downer. That second thing in a trilogy is always a downer.
That's probably why we've moved to more duologies than trilogies.
So, Erin, what are you taking away from today?
I am taking away, I think, basically what I just said about how important it is to give your readers satisfaction in the original story and how that be just as important as laying the foundation for your next story. What about you?
I think I'm going to be thinking a lot about how the action plot and emotional plot resolve. Whether that's resolving at the same time or resolving one first and then the other, and how that might mirror the beginning of the book. I think that's a really smart, that book ending I really like.
Yeah. And I do like that idea of sort of the double bookends on those that I hadn't really thought about. So I've been waiting. What is today's cool gadget?
So as promised, I'm bringing back the meteor bracelet for an encore performance. Woo. In the last episode, we talked about the bracelet's practical use as a weapon, and we saw that in action in the museum scenes. And today, I want to focus on its emotional use, particularly how the bracelet comes into play in Ross's relationship with Devereaux and this big theme that we've been talking about, trust.
Objective correlative.
Yeah, well... endowed object, but
I guess
it's
yes.
an endowed object.
You're right. Oh, dang it. I was hoping to sound fancy. Endowed object would have also sounded fancy. I could have said that, but I couldn't remember that term, honestly.
Right. Well, if you had come to my free workshop on making emotions concrete, you'd have heard a lot about endowed objects. And actually, I will be teaching that workshop again in the fall at an SCBWI region. So
maybe I can come then.
Yeah. But it is an endowed object, which means it's an object that is endowed with meaning that often has resonance in an emotional way. And so here is what happens. This is in the last half of the book when they're in the sarcophagus heist section. And it's right before Ross and Devereaux are getting ready for their reconnaissance. And we really haven't seen the meteor bracelet that much in between, if at all, since the museum.
Right.
And Ross is getting dressed up in her fancy red dress, and she goes to pull it on her meteor bracelet, and Devereaux is like, this thing is too grungy. You're going to give yourself away. And she insists, like, fine, I'll leave it for tonight. We're not going into anything dangerous. It's just reconnaissance. But she insists she's going to wear it the next night. And he says, perhaps we can have it colored gold by tomorrow. That color looks good on you. And then he gets all flirty about some gold beads in her hair, and she's totally distracted by that.
It was a very cute scene.
Yes. I didn't do my Devereaux British accent. Maybe later.
Ooh.
The next day, as she's getting ready for the auction, she can't find her bracelet. And she calls it my weapon, my security blanket. So we know she's reminding us of that emotional resonance that it has for her already. And she's sure Devereaux has taken it. She texts him asking where it is. And then when he arrives to get ready for the auction, she asks again and he ignores her. And after they get ready, she says, okay, it's time. Where's my meteor bracelet? And then here is where the object becomes something even more than a weapon or a security blanket. And I'm going to read this section for you without the accents. Devereaux deflated a touch, like he'd been hoping I'd say something else. He drew a thin silver box tied with a shiny gold bow from his tux jacket. He wrapped it? Talk about dramatic. I told you I'd give it back, he said. I snatched the box and ripped the ribbon off. You know it's not a gift when it was already mine. I popped open the box. When I saw what was inside, I went still. It was so familiar, yet different, more beautiful. What used to be a grungy aged silver was now rose gold. It looked like a piece from an edgy Tiffany collection, something that would be totally overpriced but sold out in minutes. I drew it link by link from the box, marveling at the way it sparkled under the light. Devereaux took my wrist and helped me wrap it on. I told you it would need to be camouflaged if you wanted to wear it tonight. I soaked in the warmth of his fingertips as he slid on the ring and snapped the metallic ball into place on it. Now you can wear it anywhere, without looking like you just left a biker club. A little flutter swept through my heart. It was just a weapon, but it was more than that. He took something I'd had my whole life solely for practicality and made it stunning. I fumbled for words. How did he know I'd like this? It was the best gift anyone had ever given me. Whew! Like we've got all that time dilation, like it's slowing down. We're in the moment. There's all that sensory detail. And she tells us it is endowed now. He's taken something that was just practical and made it stunning. It's the best gift anyone had ever given me. And so Ross really feels seen. It shows this deep connection. It shows that Devereaux is aware and paying attention to her and is so thoughtful in this moment.
It is really thoughtful. And then the other thing you mentioned that she's been seen, and I think that's like, we haven't really talked about it that much, but it is one of the reasons I think she wants that more normal life and she wants friends, is because she wants to be seen. She feels sort of taken advantage of by her mom, like that her mom just assumes she's going to be there and going to be her right-hand man always, and isn't ever like, are you okay? Or thanks for your help. She's just like, okay, next thing. So it's extra impactful, I guess is the best way to put it.
So then Lewis brings this object back one more time. And it is at the end when she arrives at the ballroom and the bracelet becomes this connection to Devereaux in the face of his deception. So here is what Lewis writes. Lit with a spotlight in the middle of the ballroom was a figure standing in wait, Devereaux. Just a few hours ago, I was wrapped in his arms. I'd naively let myself fall for him. I'd done the unforgivable. I'd trusted him. The rose gold bracelet he'd given me was still around my wrist. Did he take pride in that? I unclipped my meteor bracelet, fully prepared to use it.
Knife to the heart, or maybe knife to the back. One in the heart
meteor bracelet to the throat.
Yeah.
After this betrayal, then, she turns it into a weapon again, right? And a weapon that she's ready to use on him.
Right.
So Lewis uses this object to show us so much about Ross and so much about her relationship with Devereaux and so much about her trust at different stages. So I really like that as an cool gadget, an object, endowed object.
Endowed object. Excellent. Yes. Yeah, it's a super smart device because, you know, at the very beginning, we learn about Ross through it. She doesn't like guns. She doesn't like the mess of
knives or syringes.
Yeah. So we learn about her through it. But we also learn that she's not someone who is going to let herself be taken advantage of. So she has this alternate thing. And then, as you said, we get this extra added connection with romance and trust because she's been keeping Devereaux at arm's length. But finally, he gives her this lovely bracelet, and it's like, you know, big, heartfelt, lean in. And I do think it's really interesting. The rose gold bracelet he'd given me was still around my wrist. Did he take pride in that? As though he had like this whole devious plan, which honestly, I mean, maybe you can tell I still love Devereaux a little bit because I don't think he did. I don't think he had this plan. I think he had to betray her. But
well, I think you'll find out in Heist Royale, and you'll be happy to know that like the paragraph after the one that I read from Heist Royale, he is super flirty and she is super annoyed that he's still flirty.
I love it. I love those banter scenes. So we have this object that is just so useful as a story tool.
Yes. It's a great way to use the object in so many different ways. And I encourage people to find an object in your story that you can layer more stuff onto.
I bet there's stuff that you don't have to be like, what could this really important thing be? It could just be something you've already written. I would imagine that Lewis wrote the meteor bracelet because that was a really cool weapon that she thought of. And then later was like, oh, look what I could do with it. Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I imagine, I don't know, but if it were me, that's how it would happen.
Yeah. I think we've done it, Erin.
We did
12
it.
episodes.
Yay, 12 episodes.
I had another question, which is, now that we've been through 12 episodes about the craft of Thieves Gambit, how do you feel?
How do I feel?
You mentioned at the beginning that you chose this book because you wanted to figure out how to write a thriller. Do you feel like this has helped you?
Oh, for sure. And it's also hurt me because now I think, ugh, look at all that work. I don't know if I can do it.
You can do it. I know you can do it.
Well, I appreciate that. It's helped me because I will say that I was definitely giving a short shrift to the emotional side, because I would say that the bulk of thrillers do give a short shrift to the emotional side. But I think the main reason I liked this so much is because there were so many emotional tie-ins throughout the story. And so it helped me really like Ross a lot and want to root for her. And so I do think that it has definitely helped me. And then also recognizing that it still goes through a lot of the same story markers, just the same plot points that we see in most Western lit. It's kind of comforting to realize, oh, I know how to do that part. So there's that. But yes, thinking more about emotional side has actually definitely slowed down what I've been doing in the preparing for the writing, because I want to make sure I hit that and do a good job hitting that. But I think that will help once I start the actual writing. That makes sense.
Awesome. I'm glad.
Yeah, no, me too. If there's anything somebody wants to write, I highly recommend taking a book you like apart and figuring out what it is that the author has done. Because you learn a lot. Mm-hmm. Or you can listen to us do it.
Yeah, well, and in the writing middle grade for picture book authors class and the writing middle grade and YA novels class that I teach, that's what we do. I have everybody read one book together, and then that's the example that I use through class. And then each person picks their own novel that's like something they want to write, and then they do those same exercises with that novel. And it's really amazing to see what people are learning and taking from those books, because every book is different and every genre has its own stylistic choices and voice is different. Like, there's so many things that can be different in a book. And so looking at something that's like what you want to write is so, so valuable.
Yes, I totally agree. I think it's maybe the most valuable thing I learned in our MFA program. But I also think it's valuable to see what you don't want to do. And that's not even like a diss on the books, because there might be something that you think they've done well, but it doesn't quite suit what you're trying to do. And then you could find somebody else who did it the way you want to do it. Or I guess you could just go off on your own, but I don't know why you'd want to do that.
Yeah. My friend Jackie, when she gets to a place where she's stuck and doesn't know what to do in the book, she pulls 3 or 4 other books and reads just that section. So she was working on the endings. She's like, something is not quite working about my ending. And so she broke down the endings of 4 different novels and pulled a little something from each to try and experiment with her own. And that's been really successful for her.
That is super smart. Kudos to her for doing that, because it is kind of like side writing where you're like, what? I want to do the fun part of writing, right? And I don't want to do this extra stuff. But there's so much that you learn doing the extra stuff. So I have really enjoyed seeing actual mechanics of Thieves Gambit and how they play out. Because honestly, I read it so quickly initially, and I just enjoyed a lot of it. I mean, by saying that, is my brain works in a way that I almost always am taking apart pieces of books when I'm reading them, and kind of like a puzzle. So if I read something super quickly, it's very rare like that. And so to do that, and then we were talking about, what do we want to do for season 2? And I thought, I enjoyed that book. Let's do it. And I did not realize how full of lessons it was.
Mm-hmm. And lessons that apply to more to just thrillers. Like, I am not writing a thriller. I am writing sad contemporary stuff. And I've really found a lot of things from this book applicable to my own writing. So,
well, that's awesome.
I appreciate you choosing it.
Well, good.
That's it for today and this season. The KidLit Craft podcast is produced by me, scripted by Erin, edited by Ander Nettle, with music by Trevor Stroman. And if you enjoyed this podcast, you can find more content like this at KidLitCraft.com, where you can sign up for classes, workshops, book clubs, and read a lot of craft articles on various topics, including endowed objects. Find us on social media at KidLit Craft, and you can support this podcast on Patreon. And we have t-shirts that you can find at Cotton Bureau. There will be a link in the show notes.
They are very soft and comfortable t-shirts. Please download episodes, like, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen, and let your writer friends or all your friends, your grandma, your parents, anyone you think might be interested about the podcast. And who wouldn't be interested? Obviously, we gave you a fascinating season after an already spectacular season in season 1. So anyway, we can't wait to nerd out with you.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next season.
Woo! I just had to add that since it was our last